is happening, everybody? So we're using this from a totally different platform that I've used before. We're just going with it tonight. So right now we're going on Facebook Live, and we're talking. Ali, what are we talking about tonight?
We're talking about feeding our fish, and we're talking a little bit about corals too. But tonight it's mainly about fish today. So.
Fish, corals. Let's do this. So
maybe
we got
even some freshwater fish.
Yeah, we'll talk about freshwater, like dosing, planet tanks.
What?
A little bit.
What do we have going on? What is happening? So please tell me what are we starting off with? So we're talking saltwater fish right off the back. You want to talk about fish? You want to talk about corals? What do you want to talk about?
So we can quickly go over corals real quick since just get that out of the way. So of course here we use Coral Max. It's the way to go. Corals love it. It's a really, really great food. We've had a really awesome feeding response from our corals with that. Just mix with a little water, little tank water, and you just target feed, or you can broadcast feed. It's great food. We also, you might have seen if you've been in here, we also started with the live food now. So we finally have this. We have copepods of the Tisbees, I believe.
We have the
Tisbees, and then we have the phytoplankton.
And we got the live phytoplankton. It's pretty cool. If you want, you come in, you get one of these, you open it up, pop it in, fill it up yourself, fill it up, and then you are off. I really like the new live ones. That's why we really been moving much more to this one. It just seems to work a lot better. So I've been kind of working with that one.
Everybody say hello to Jeffrey who's watching.
Oh, Jeffrey.
Hi, Jeffrey. So copepods are really great, of course, for your corals. You know, that's just like if they reproduce in your tank, it's like a free food. And also, too, of course, everyone knows for mandarins. If you're going to do mandarins, you have to have copepods. Even if they eat frozen or pellets, they really need to still have the copepods in their diet. They eat constantly all day long, so you got to have these.
Wait, I know when we're talking about mandarins, like, what would you say? So that's one of the biggest things. People see like psychedelic mandarins. Everyone wants to get into a mandarin. Everyone. You see a mandarin, everyone wants to do it. How long would you say until you get a mandarin into your tank?
Honestly, personally, I wouldn't do one anything sooner than 6 months. You need time for your copepod population to really get going. Just adding pods once when you first start your tank is not enough for them. They need to eat, like I said, they eat all day long, and they can demolish a copepod population super fast in just like a week. And then unfortunately, they can starve after that. So they definitely need to be fed. Or to have copepods all the time. Honestly, and they don't do well in small tanks because the copepod population just can't be sustained that way. If you have a refugium, so if you have a sump and you have a refugium, you can seed it with pods. And the pod, it's like a refugium, you know, it's a safe place for your pods to reproduce, and then they're safe without any predation at all. And then they get sucked up into your return and they go into your tank. And then of course they reproduce in the rockwork, but that way you always have that constant supply. But it's always good to add some pods, even if you have a well-established pod population in there, it always helps to add some in just to keep it boosted.
So we're at 6 months, you have a mandarin, you've added a mandarin. How often am I going to add that?
I mean, before you really get like a really nice population going, I would add it honestly every, I don't know, would you say like a month or so?
Yeah.
You know, get it going.
We would say definitely add it every month. Definitely once a month. If you can go bi-weekly, that's up to you. Depends on how much of that pod population they're eating for it. But that is definitely one of the biggest things. When it comes to mandarins, you want to make sure you have a very well-established pod population, and you want to make sure the tanks thrive. And that's why we recommend a minimum of 6 months before you even get into a mandarin.
Yep. And they're so tempting because they're like the most beautiful fish out there. I mean, debatable, I guess. But to me, they're the most beautiful fish out there.
That was the first fish I wanted to put in the tank, and they all told me no. So.
He has a 10-gallon. So,
unfortunately,
no refugium. Not happening.
So it is super tempting, but please, definitely, if you're going to do that, give it time and try to have a refugium in your tank. Or if you have a big tank, you know, then it's okay. But we also have the phytoplankton too. So that is really great also for feeding pods. Pods feed off of phytoplankton. So if you have like a refugium in your sump, you can get some phyto, you can pour it right in your sump, they'll feed off that. But you don't want to do a whole lot at once. You can actually get like a algae bloom in your tank if you put too much phyto in at once.
And you'll actually get a little bit of bacteria bloom too. You'll see it. If you really overdo it, you'll get it like the water will have a green tint to it, or you'll actually get like a white bacteria bloom from it. And that's from overfeeding the tank.
Yep. So if you just do, I would say like a capful. It depends on the size of your tank. Of course, if you have a huge tank, you can do a little bit more. But I usually say start with a capful a week. You know, and it stays good in your fridge, so you just leave it in the fridge. I'd say probably 2 months. It does, it does okay. Just shake it up pretty often. Once it starts to turn brown or goopy or anything, then it's not good. But yeah. So that's with our live food. Live food's great. So that's honestly the way to go. Also, corals will eat phytoplankton too. So if you don't have a refugium, you can still feed phyto. You could just do, like I said, like a catful. If you have clams eat phytoplankton. They're filter feeders, so the phyto is really beneficial for them too.
Now, off of the live foods, what are we going to get into? Like, what is in our refrigerator for liquids?
All right, so in the fridge, we have Chris's favorite, and honestly my favorite too. This is Fritz Azok's food. There it is. So this is a coral food. It's super clean. There's no like any really extra added stuff. It's great. You really can't. I mean, you can, but you can add. You can't really overdo it. You know, it's a very clean food. It's not going to cause a ridiculous increase in nitrates or anything like that, like some of the powder foods might if you overfeed it. So it's a really good food. Honestly, my antheists love it too. So small fish will really like it. There are some bigger particles in there that even small fish will eat too. So
no, that's
it's a really great food.
That's fantastic. And the next one on for we'll get onto these ones too: phytoplankton and zooplankton.
Yep. So these are off the counter. So these ones aren't refrigerated, but once they're open, you do want to refrigerate them. So these ones you can kind of overdo. So you just want to. There you go. You just want to make sure you follow directions on there carefully. Just like the like we were saying with the live phyto, if you do too much of this too, you can have another like bacterial bloom from overfeeding. So just follow that. Even sometimes too, I like to add a little bit of this to my Coral Max here. So when I make up some food with this, I add a little bit of that too. That way it's being target fed to my corals too.
Now, when it comes down to coral foods, the Coral Max is our number one to go to for dry foods. This is the main one we use for all of OSA. This is what we mix. And what I like about this mix is it's a heavy phytoplankton, zooplankton. It's got copepods, spirulina.
Farm-raised spirulina.
Yeah, the mix on this is probably the best blend out there because when it came down to different types of foods like that, we were mixing and matching all these different types of foods. And this one was pretty much the best diversity of something different. That was out there. And that's why that became our number one food source when it really came down to our corals.
And the corals love it.
So that food, just for reference, it reaches a broad range of corals instead of just targeting one specific type of food for a specific type of coral. Right?
Yeah, and then best part is also so you can broadcast or you can target feed.
Yep. And it's kind of, like he said, it kind of mixes everything for, there's some foods that are only good for Gonioporas, stuff like that. So this will have all of that in there. So everything should be able to eat this just fine. All right. So that's what we have for coral food.
That's it. So, coral food is next. So after coral food, what's happening?
So fish food. So that's one of the questions we get all the time is what's the best thing to feed my fish, especially people that are just starting out. So we'll kind of go through the options that you have here. Let me see what I got here. So of course, like the basic food that we offer is flake food. So flake food is definitely not bad. It's a well-rounded diet, but it can make your tank a little dirty if you overfeed it. So
and phosphates galore.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got binders and stuff in it that can cause high phosphates and high nitrates, especially if not everything's getting eaten. And flakes are messy, so fish will pick at them, spit them out, and just make a mess out of it. So, I mean, it works if you have a couple little fish, but not the highest recommended. And then next I would say would be the
pelleted food.
Pellets.
Yeah.
So pellets are definitely a cleaner option.
That one right there.
That's the tropical, but that's okay.
We'll use tropical.
So pretend that says marine on it. We have the marine one too, but we also have tropical for your freshwater.
Yeah, absolutely.
So pellets are definitely a better option if you're going to do a dry food. They are cleaner. They all get eaten up instead of like the flakes where they might fall apart. Anything that falls to the bottom, it's easy for inverts to get to. And I mean, it's a well-rounded diet. It's got it's fully nutritional. So, fish aren't going to miss out on anything. It's good food. And then next, of course, my favorite is frozen food. Frozen food is like the way to go. You can't get much better than that besides live, but that's just not attainable.
Yeah,
usually.
so frozen food is the OSA way. Like we use frozen food for all saltwater fish. That's what ours eat. Every fish gets frozen food here at the OSA. The main ones we get into is you can go into it. You want to grab those?
What?
Yeah, you got them right there.
All right.
There you go.
So the main food we carry at the moment is Hikari. Hikari is a great clean food. Doesn't really have anything added to it. It's just the bare basics, and it's great. We're also going to be bringing back rods finally, so we're very excited about that.
Rods is coming back this week, baby.
Woo!
It's took us a while, but it is coming back.
We got our
we
fridge
have two
over there. Freezer, yes. So
Freezer.
we finally have the room back again, so we're going to be having rods. Rods is an amazing food. Again, it's very clean. It's just, the best of the best. Hikari is great because you can get it in cubes, like these guys here. Very easy. It's attainable. They also have the flats, too, the big flats. Yep. I think they're 16-ounce that we sell.
Better bang for your buck if you go with the flats, but super easy, convenient if you're going with the cubes. Yep.
Yeah, and if you don't have a lot of fish, the cubes, or if you have just a couple fish even, the flats are good because then you can just break off a little bit. The cubes, you have to kind of use the whole cube. You can't really break the cube in half. So if you only have like a couple fish, even the flats are great. But these are good if if you're like me and you're busy and you just need to feed, you just pop them out. It's easy. But yeah, like you said, you kind of save some money getting the big 16-ounce flats. But so with frozen food, usually what we recommend is to strain it through a net. If you have a very fine net, like a brine shrimp net, like we have back there, you actually you thaw it out in a little bit of tank water. Perfect. You thaw your food out in a little bit of tank water, and then once it's fully thawed out, you want to pour it through the net to strain out all that extra liquid. So in frozen food, there's going to be a lot of water, and the water can get a little yucky, just from
all
the
excess
food.
Nutrients.
Exactly, and
don't want in the tank.
The main issue I see is people sometimes will pour the food right in once they thaw it out. And the problem with that is all that extra nutrients and all that extra particles that are so tiny that the fish aren't eating are now just floating around and they land on the rocks. And then they always say they have cyano problems. And that's usually why. It's because the excess nutrients are just like landing on the rocks. And if you don't have a lot of flow, no flow and a lot of extra nutrients is going to just equal cyano 100%. So I've noticed a very big correlation between the two. If you strain your food and then pick it out with tweezers, feeding tongs back there, or your fingers if it doesn't bother you. And you can just pick up the food and you put it right in your tank. That's the best way to do it. That way you're not getting all that extra stuff in there.
Especially with predator fish like Fred.
Exactly. You want to use tongs for predator
and that
fish.
does come into huge play, like I was talking about, with not just cyanobacteria, but hair allergy, right?
Yeah.
Because you're leaving those excess organics are now creating where they can feed off of that.
Yeah, exactly. Any excess stuff that algae is just going to love. And then also too, so hopefully you guys don't have to ever use medication. But if you do,
you want to get to Soko Boost first before you jump in that?
Yeah, we'll do that.
So wait, you want to talk about the diversity?
Yeah, we'll talk about
go ahead. We'll talk about that. So
fresh and salt.
There is so many different types of food, and diversity is the most important thing. And I'm not kidding when I say I have like 30 different types of food at home, and I only feed frozen. So there is so many varieties. Hikari, that by themselves has like ton of different varieties. Mega Marine, like the Mega Marine Angel there. Then there's regular Mega Marine and Mega Marine Algae. They in themselves have like 7 or 8 different types of foods in just that one packet. So variety is so important. If you're just feeding your fish brine shrimp, or especially brine shrimp is a huge one. If it's just brine, it's not super nutritious. It's good as like a treat or something to add in. But it doesn't carry much nutrition. The spirulina brine is better. It's definitely, it's more fortified. It's got the added spirulina in it.
Spirulina is a super
That's
good
the one
guy.
right
that one there.
That's the number. So usually that one and the mice is usually our top ones to go to.
Yep. Yeah. So that one's good. But you definitely think of it like us. If we're just eating the same thing every day, we're gonna miss out on so many nutrients that we're not getting from just that one single food. It works the same way with fish. They need variety in their diet. And if you're just feeding frozen, you have to do that. If you're feeding pellets and then you're doing frozen as like just an extra thing, that's fine. You can stick to just one single thing. But if you're not going to do pellets or a flake and you're just going to do frozen like I do and like we do here, you have to have that variety. One of the big ones is definitely mysis. It's very nutritious. It's got a high protein. We also carry Canadian mysis too by Cobalt. And that's we've looked at it. We've compared the two. The Canadian Cobalt mysis has a higher protein content. So that's a really, really good food too. And we've had it and people didn't really know we had it. But that one I highly suggest. It's actually the one we use here. So it's a really good one.
We use quite a few of them. And the reason why we use that is we're selling fish, right? But we put a lot of work into it, not just fish for sale for you guys to buy, but also for our services and things like that. So like we're really picky about where these fish are going, what's going to happen to them. So the biggest thing is we want them to be full bellies. We want to make sure if they have any protozoa parasites right there, we can go treat them. And then also they're eating as much food as they can to go through and get rid of all that waste and everything else that's in there and really clean out their systems. That's why frozen food just works out so much better. It's like you're giving them full main course meals. And then the next thing she's getting into is, you want to talk about the Sulco Boost?
Sure, yeah. So we feed our fish so much, like he was saying. We want them to be the healthiest they can be for you guys. And the healthy fish is just less chance of getting sick or anything else. So we had this Sulco Boost here, also made by Fritz. So this is a really good additive to add to your food. It has omega-3s. It's even got some garlic in there to help with finicky fish that aren't really eating, or just to help with their immune system. And it's got all sorts of like EPAs and DHAs that are really important to the development of the fish. And we add this religiously to our food. It just helps, like I said, with new fish, when they're coming in, they might be a little stressed. They might not be eating right away. So this really helps to get them eating and get them fattened up nice and quickly. And it's definitely good to use at home too. You don't have to just use it on new fish or anything like that. It's good just to add here and there. And that's the other thing too, the Canadian mysis, it's already infused with this.
Yes.
So it's a good
And that's why one of the big reasons why we got into that one too was because it was already infused. And we saw a difference pretty quick.
Yeah.
Like the fish, there's a reason why we spend that extra money on that for the fish here. It's because it works. That's why we like it.
Definitely. So another really, really important thing that we really try to push with, especially people that are buying tangs and other herbivores, is seaweed. Seaweed is so important on so many levels for your herbivores. If they're not eating seaweed, they can run into a ton of health problems. Tangs especially, they can develop head lateral line erosion, which if you've been here, you've met our lady Dory in there. So she's
Grandma Dory.
She is I think she's 10 years old. She's definitely a grandma, but if you see her face, you'll see she's got some discoloration and some issues on her face. She actually looks a million times better now because we've been really feeding her lots of seaweed. But she's a great example, and we like to show her to people because she's a great example as to why seaweed is so important. Unfortunately, she didn't probably get enough seaweed as she should have been getting, and it unfortunately caused a lot of problems, and it causes like a malnutrition. So they start to have literally holes in their face.
Yeah.
So it's really important, and it's also important for like your fox faces, your rabbit fish, and all your other herbivores that are eating it. And honestly, everybody else loves it too. All the fish in my tank eat it, even the wrasses and clowns, they love it. So it's something that you should offer every day. Usually, I think you leave it in about they say 24 hours, but it's usually gone within 1 hour. So usually you don't have to leave it in there. There's a couple different kinds. This one here is a mix. This is also Fritz again. And this comes with red and green. And then this is just red. We've got more green over there. And mixing it up, again, variety is good. Some fish are picky about the red algae, but it's a really good nutritious option. So definitely try and feed that. Mine love it. Some of them don't. And then, of course, you're going to be trying to get that seaweed in there. So I highly recommend this veggie mag. We have a couple other options too, but it's magnetic. You can just clip it on there, leave it in there until they finish it, and then take it out and clean it. But yeah, and then a lot of the seaweed too is infused with garlic, which, you know, it's helpful. It helps getting them eat, and it helps keep their immune system up.
No, it's totally true. And that's one of the things. And you'll see malnutrition, especially when it comes to tanks. You'll see, like, especially yellow tanks, they'll be like an off color. They'll look like a white. And that's a very easy sign of that. So you want to make sure that's definitely part of the variety of the diet. And all the time when it comes down to tanks. It's extremely, extremely important.
It also helps with aggression too. So a lot of people have issues with aggression in their tanks. And basically, if you think about it, in the wild, they have so much food options. They're constantly eating all day long. And in a tank, they're now in a much smaller area. And if they're competing with other fish for food, that's where the aggression comes from. So they see that fish as now a threat to their food source. Where in the wild, they have so much they don't even have to worry about it. So it works the same way in a tank. If you can offer plenty of seaweed all the time, then they shouldn't fight as much as that they would if you weren't. So definitely try and offer as much seaweed as you can, and it definitely doesn't hurt. And it doesn't dirty the water if you take it out after, like, if it's still there after 24 hours, take it out, but it doesn't
Yeah, you just don't want to leave like certain packets that keep them in, they close up on them. You don't want to leave that. You want to be able to take that out, clean that off, and put a new one in there because you don't want it to rot inside there.
One of the worst smells is rotten seaweed. I tell you, it's horrible. So that's super important. So I definitely want to make sure they're getting that. So one other last thing I wanted to mention too was, and I had kind of started talking about it, but I got distracted there.
Scott, throwing her off the
no,
We've talked about this before, but I want to bring it back in because it's so important, especially with the frozen foods. And when you're adding new fish and when you're having a quarantine tank and everything we got going on is when it comes down to medications. But medications you're using via feeding your fish.
Yep. And just to answer Joe's question real quick, I like to feed daily. I mean, it really just depends on the fish you have in your tank. Some fish need to eat very often. So anthias especially. Anthias, they have a very fast metabolism, and in the wild they're planktivores, which means they eat literally all day long. They just eat plankton. So you definitely, if you have fish like that, you want to feed daily, sometimes twice a day. But when I feed frozen, what I do is I take a pinch of food and I put it in just enough, just for them to eat it. If they eat it in like 10 seconds, I do a little bit more. That way you're not having a ton floating around your tank and stuff's going to get lost and stuck in all the nook and crannies. I just feed literally tiny bit, let them eat it, tiny bit, let them eat it. And I do that several times until they seem to be full. Honestly, they never seem full, so I kind of have to cut them off after a few times. But and I like to do that twice a day. Some people with reef tanks don't like to feed every day. It's really kind of like personal preference, and it really depends on your fish. Like that's super important too. But usually it's like a personal preference.
Like big predator fish, you're feeding like once or twice a week. Something like that, like a big moray eel or something like that, like once a week.
Yep, so predator fish can go a lot longer. So my moray, I have a zebra moray in my reef tank. I feed him once a week. And like lionfish, you can feed a couple times a week, once a week. Just because if you overfeed predators, it's actually bad for them. So it can sit in their stomach and rot, and it's not good. So you just want to feed them once in a while. But normal fish in your reef tank or even in your fish only, it's usually once a day.
Yep.
But yes, so to get back to our medication. So when we strain our frozen food into the net, so we want to basically have it almost like a gooey. You don't want it wet dripping because it's actually not going to, the medication isn't quite going to bond to the food. So like Scott said, we've talked about this before, but we wanted to kind of bring it up just because we get this question a lot on how we're going to actually get this into the food. So this is Focus, Metroplex, and Canoplex. So these are made by Seachem, and they're basically we do the Focus and the Metroplex if you're seeing ick on your fish. So ick is one of the biggest problems in the industry. So nothing totally kills ick except for copper or going fallow. But if that's not an option for you, which unfortunately really isn't for quite a lot of people. And in a reef tank, you just cannot use copper. So this is the next best thing. Metroplex is meant for ick and other protozoan parasites. And then we have the Canoplex, which treats any fungal. But the Focus is a binder. So you add this to the food first. Usually it's like a scoop, but it depends on how much you're feeding. If it's only a couple fish, you're going to do a little less than that. And then you do some of the Metro or Canna, depending on which one you're treating. And then you mix it together and you let it sit for 5 minutes. So the Focus is a binder. So that makes sure that this Metro binds to the food. So you have to add both. You have to get both. But you have to strain the food out, especially if you have a reef tank, because if this medication is in the water and it goes in your tank, it's not bound to the food, so the fish aren't getting it. And it could get into all your your corals.
You do not want Metro in your corals. You will run into an issue. Corals are not going to be happy, and you could run into serious issues if this gets into corals. But you got to play that out. When we're doing reef tanks, we're playing the seesaw. We're always riding this happy equilibrium, this happy thing. So it's like you try to do one thing to solve this problem, but doing that, you're going to have to take care of something else at the same time.
Yep. It is reef safe, but like you said, if it's getting into your corals and your corals are eating it, they're not going to be happy, and it can definitely cause problems. So you want to make sure that the food is like a gooey, so it's not, we don't want it dripping anymore. We want to make sure it's fully, usually I stir it up, make sure it's fully drained out before I add any. And then I like to add a little bit of garlic too, if you're having issues, just to make sure they're eating. So that's just something we wanted to make sure we threw out there because we get that question a lot. You can also use this stuff with pellets, but it's honestly, frozen's the only best way to do it. I don't know how well it really works with the pellets, but I would just do frozen if you're going to do that.
Yeah, here in the shop, that's all we use. We use the frozen, and then we also, for services, we use frozen as well. And say if we're doing a service and we're we're not there. You know, set up. So we'll actually use the specimen containers. We pre-do everything in here, so they can just put it in here. It's already pre-mixed, and they can just put it in.
Yep. There's also, so we showed you what we have here. There's so many options that you can do. You can mix it up. You could do pellets sometimes, frozen other times. Like when I'm having a lazy day and I didn't thaw any food out, I throw some pellets in. But 99% of the time, I only do frozen. You'll see such a difference in your fish. They'll look better.
Especially
their colors will
birth.
be better. Better. They'll fatten up a lot better. Fish should be fat. So
Yes.
make sure you're feeding them enough. You know, we don't want them to be skinny. So yeah, I mean, that's basically what I've got about that.
I like how you like that. Basically, what I got. That's what she did right there. That's what
Ali
she did.
just talked for, wait a minute, 25 minutes straight, guys. So
I think
just
it's
dropping
Justin.
straight knowledge. I mean, you basically covered everything. I mean, kind of more towards the saltwater realm of things. We use, well, I do upstairs anyway, the Metroplex, the Focus, the Conoplex upstairs. In the freshwater, I bind it with brine shrimp or brine shrimp spirulina. And then feeding bloodworms is another big thing, especially finicky freshwater fish. Bloodworms and brine shrimp spirulina, they're really, really good at getting those finicky fish to eat, especially like discus. You really got to start them off on bloodworms. So that's the biggest thing. Variety is key. I think that's the whole theme of this live stream is just you got to feed variety. You can't just feed one thing. That's like, you know, us eating a burger for the rest of our life.
It's just not happening.
It's just not happening. We couldn't do it, so don't do it to your fish. It's torture. They don't have a choice. So help them out. Feed variety. I mean, Ali did a fantastic job. So very few minor differences in freshwater, but the whole thing is variety. So
That's it, guys. So we appreciate it. If you guys haven't seen any of the other videos, and make sure you check out anything that Ali's shooting out there. You can find it right on our YouTube channel.
yes.
You can find it right on Ocean State Aquatics TV on
Seahorses.
YouTube. Ali just did a video on seahorses. It's absolutely fantastic,
We
and
got
I
more.
love it.
We got more seahorses in. We got
Yes.
lined seahorses, and they're huge.
We got ginormous seahorses in.
So definitely come check those guys out.
So there's tons of content coming up on the YouTube channel right now. Like Scott just mentioned, the seahorse video, a little informational video with Ali. We also did last week, which is actually blowing up right now. So many people are watching it. We did a feeding video on predator fish, specifically Fred, who's our big pupper, talking about you know, how they have to eat certain types of food to shade down their beak, all that jazz. We got Aquashella content coming out the pipeline like crazy.
All week. If you guys didn't see
Listen.
anything we had from Aquashell, you guys can go check out that. We had so much stuff
Oh my
out there
goodness.
on that. It was an absolute fantastic
If you
show.
guys are not subscribed, go to the channel right now, State Aquatics TV on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Click the notification bell so YouTube notifies you when we upload. And go down a little bit. You'll see the Aquashella playlist. We got the first 2 episodes up right now on the channel. And we got more coming out this week. I'm hoping for Friday, Saturday upload of Aquashella, actually day 1 at the show. So stay tuned, guys. It's all happening. It's insane. It's
Ali,
awesome.
anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
All right, you guys got to finish it off for me.
Keep it fresh,
moving,
baby.
Woo!